Hey, it's the Coach and Benway podcast. Coach, what's on your mind these days?
A lot of stuff. The thing that I'm really amazed is that the House Intelligence Committee cleared Trump of any kind of collusion with Russia. And I'm wondering how that's going to affect Robert Mueller. I mean, where does the guy stand now that the House Committee has cleared him? Okay, granted, I know that the Republican Intelligence Committee, House Intelligence Committee, is dominated by Republicans, but still, it's a pretty big mark. And those Republicans are not going to stick their neck out if there really was any kind of evidence saying that there is even the remote possibility of collusion between the Russians and Trump. So what do you think that leaves Mueller at?
Honestly enough, I think he's probably still going to be doing what he's doing. The problem being is that the Mueller investigation has a mandate which is way too beyond the ability to rein it in some sense. It doesn't have a specific, see what the president did or did not do with regard to colluding with Russians to affect the election. It's basically now like, oh, whatever crimes I happen to find or whatever kind of funky stuff I find, it's all fair game.
I know. It's like an endless mandate. It just goes sniffing and sniffing around endlessly. Because essentially a special prosecutor, as I understand it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, he doesn't really have a boss. He doesn't really answer to anybody except Congress as this vague and empty concept. Because does he actually answer to anybody? Does he have a boss saying, well, you're getting nowhere, so move on to the next case or shut it down? Does he?
He answers to the Deputy Attorney General,
Rod Rosenstein.
Rosenstein, because Sessions recused himself. And what has Sessions been doing these days, I have no fucking idea. But also, technically, Trump is ultimately his boss. Trump can, if he so choose, order Rosenstein to fire Mueller. Now, there's some, whimperings in the Congress about trying to impose some legislation to prevent the president from doing that, but legally he is able to do that. There's going to be some liberal constitutional scholars who say, no, you can't do that, but really he can. It's part of the executive. He's not going to do it right now for political reasons. The Democrats will make hay of it. But yeah, Trump has the power to get rid of him.
Well, the thing though, that's the problem I see, and I think you'll see it also, is that, hey, we've been at this for over a year. The guy hasn't found anything on Trump per se. They keep hitting rumblings that, anything we do find is peripheral to Trump, not related to him. But it's going to have to justify all of its expense somehow. Right. So whether it actually punishes the president, that's TBD. But someone's going to, be a head on a table to say, oh, you see, I did something. I achieved something. Well,
you gotta give me that.
What does he have so far that, he's accusing or indicted 13 Russians who live in Russia of basically putting Facebook ads against Trump or in favor of Trump, against Hillary? I mean, who gives a shit? It's trivial. Okay. And on top of that, wasn't it basically that these 13 Russians were basically like spamming online? It sounds incredibly stupid that would be a criminal behavior or lead to any kind of criminal consequence. I don't know.
I don't even know that what they did constitutes spamming. I think they literally spent something on the order of a couple $100 on Facebook ads.
Yeah, it seems trivial. And the other thing that I'm finding just we have to admit something. Barack Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize for fucking nothing, for just showing up, basically, because he got elected president and he was given the Nobel Peace Prize for what exactly? The guy never did anything, and he used drones to kill boatloads of people. I mean, I think that he was as big a warmonger as George W., right? Trump actually got the North Koreans and the South Koreans to shake hands and sit across the table from each other and end the war. Because if you get right down to it, the Korean War never ended. It was just a ceasefire, right? It was never officially declared over. He got them to declare the war over. He got them negotiating by some very astute manipulation and bullying and carrot and stick kind of maneuvers. He actually does deserve the Nobel Peace Prize for what he did in Korea. Do you think he's going to get it?
No, this is a very good question. He deserves it, absolutely. He's not going to get it. Well, I take that back. There's a very slim chance he might. I'll tell you the funniest thing throughout this whole thing. Last night, as I was kind of just laying about, go on to CNN for shits and giggles, and their banner headline was something to the effect of, a begrudging admission that, Trump may deserve some credit for the Korean situation. They were so, impressed to get the caveat in there that a little tiny sliver, but they had to admit it. And all I can think of to myself is all of the crying and resentment and just utter despair that must be existing amongst liberal Democratic readers, or not readers, or observers of CNN, most of whom apparently just watch CNN in airports, because that's only a time of my life when I see CNN on the fucking television.
I never tune it in either. But the thing is, of course, that the North Koreans, the South Koreans, and the Chinese, they all say that Trump was pivotal in this meeting between the leaders of North and South Korea and the end of the war, of the Korean War, the official end of the Korean War. Okay, that's pretty fucking big endorsement. Okay, the three major, the three players, the direct players, North and South Korea, and the most important peripheral player, China, they all give the guy credit, and the mainstream media, they're like quiet, like it just happened, because of the angels, By the way, do you think that it had anything to do with the bombing of Syria? Because a lot of people on Trump's side, I'm not sure about this argument, but they argue that the fact that Trump was willing to bomb Syria with all the cruise missiles and all that shit over the trivial and what is proven to be false allegation that Assad gassed his people, we'll get to that in a second, but a lot of Trumpites are saying that it's because of that, Trump's willingness to use force, that the North Koreans, sat up, took notice, and went down to the negotiating table. You think that that's true, or it's just Trumpite bullshit?
That could be, it smells like a little bit of bullshit. It may be, just peripherally true. I think more than anything else, what really did it was Trump sounding, with regard to North Korea, like the bellicose bad cop, and the South Koreans getting to be the good cop on this front. I think that because he bullied the North into the embracing arms of the South. Is how I think ultimately this worked out. Did the idea that Trump might be willing to actually do something in as a result of Syria to North Korea, maybe, but I don't think the North Koreans are that easily swayed by that. I think it was more a variety of other things. Plus, probably China gave a little bit of a nudge here or there. I don't think we should look into the Middle East for a real motivating factor as to what happened here.
My thinking is, well, if you do recall, over the past year, there were these noises that the United States was going to go to war, basically, with North Korea. There was, for a time, the distinct vibe that something was going to go down in North Korea, and then all of a sudden, the North Koreans seemed to cave, or let's put it more diplomatically, they seemed to have a rethink of their position. And they went over and shook hands with the South Koreans, and bygones are bygones, and no more war, and everything is hunky-dory in the Korean Peninsula. I don't quite, we'll never really know how much of a factor Trump had in this situation until, frankly, long after Trump is dead. When the people in North Korea start like declassifying their documents and what have you, and we start to get a sense of what they were really thinking about at the time of the last year, because it really has been the last year that the North Koreans seem to have I don't know. I can't make up my mind about Trump because I keep thinking that the guy's a fucking idiot, and then on the other hand, he seems to come up with shit that works for him. I don't know.
My attitude toward the president is always, don't be dismissive or hopeful. Just let every single event be a factor in, your judgment. It's a day-by-day situation, almost like a recovering alcoholic, perhaps. I think with the other thing about North Korea, which I can't prove either way, I can only suspect. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think, in parallel to how, part of the idea that why did the Soviet Union fall in the 80s as opposed to the 70s or the 90s?
Right.
Well, part of it is, when you put up the pressure of saying like, let's do another arms race, like, we can't afford that. That has an effect on it. I wouldn't be surprised if, that could also have been the situation in North Korea where you say, we got to really push hard on the investment in nuclear weapons. And Trump says, well, I'll fuck you up quicker. It's like, the general's going to Kim's like, you can't afford that. We're kind of fucked, because they really can't afford much of anything in truth. So I would not be surprised if it turns out that the general's got a little bit of a backbone and said, don't fuck us up completely. Let's do something more interesting here.
So you think it might have been just that they realized that they were at the end of their financial rope, and that they simply couldn't compete with the Americans or the South Koreans for that matter, insofar as military expenditure and really going all the way?
Yeah, I mean, even if even at the cost of just being able to feed, or even in the barest minimum sense, people, I think they couldn't even do that. So
Yeah,
I think that they reached the end.
it could be that. I mean, very easily. There's
Like I said,
also
I can't prove any of this. This is all suspicion.
yeah, it's idle speculation at this point. But I'm just I'm terribly confused by Trump. I mean, look, I'm incredibly relieved that he is president and not Hillary Clinton, because Hillary Clinton is just a neocon warmonger. I despise her. I think that she was a horrible, horrible human being, and she would have made a horrible president. Between somebody whom I consider sort of like borderline buffoon incompetent and Hillary Clinton, shit, I'd pick anybody over Hillary Clinton. An actual clown over Hillary Clinton. That being said, we've got the guy that we've got, and he is a constant source of embarrassment. I mean, you've seen those cabinet meetings where all the guys around the table, they're like looking at the guy, and the guy's like being this dullard blowhard, and you're like, oh man, they all look embarrassed that they have to be, that this is the guy that they lead, because none of them, it's obvious that none of them respect him, okay? But at the same time, the guy seems to do all this crazy shit and land, he sticks the landing every time. Okay, so it's incredibly annoying. It's incredibly annoying, and I can't make up my mind about the guy. Although it is incredibly amusing to watch as the left just has conniption fits over stuff. And they can't give credit where credit is due. Because the Korean situation, okay, he seems to have handled it. I don't know.
I saw, that was the other thing I saw. I think it was on CNN as well, where someone said, "Okay, this peace talks may be successful, but never let you forget that Kim Jong-un is a dirty dictator." It's like, yeah, we knew that. This is your observation.
Yeah.
It's like they need to take any last little bit they can say to sour something. That's all they've got left.
Yeah, and also remember when they had the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, and they were all like falling all over themselves over Kim Jong Un's sister, who's just fucking Lady Macbeth from Korea. I mean, she's an evil woman. You could see that on her face. She was like.
It's funny
evil.
you mentioned that. It's funny you mentioned that. I saw when some of the photos of the roundtable talks that are happening now, when they have her, like at the camera smiling, I think to myself, this is a woman who's a vampire who's like, you'll find if you see her on the middle of the street and you're like a little kid alone, it's like you're not making it home tonight.
Yeah. And there have been all kinds of crazy rumors about her that she's just like one evil woman. I'll leave you with one thought, dear listener. Look at a picture of Kim Jong-un's sister, the one who went to the Winter Olympics, and then look at a picture of Jared Kushner. Tell me that they don't look alike. Am I right or what? It's the cheekbones. It's the cheekbones. I mean, you and I, Benway, have talked about this, but
after you mentioned it, it's been stuck in my head, and now all I can think of is them meeting together in secret rendezvous for God knows what kind of midnight sessions.
Yeah, but that would be fairly, I mean, if they have secret midnight rendezvous sessions of God knows what, that would be completely like incestuous. They're the twins separated at birth. I mean, that's my thinking about those two, because they look.
Can you just imagine being the parents? It's like the parents of these. It's like, look, we're evil creatures of the night, so we have to hide our children in places where they can be evil but not easily detected. So you will go to North Korea,
and you will go to the Upper East Side.
you will go to a New York magazine, my friend.
Right. Didn't he buy the Observer or New York Mag?
He bought the Observer. Yeah. Observer.
Whatever happened to the Observer? It's gone, right? I mean, he plowed.
No, it's still there. It's still functioning. I don't know that it makes any moves. But then again, I'm not one who's reading a lot of New York magazines these days. I used to be a big New Yorker fan, but years ago I abandoned that subscription.
Yeah. Me too. When Tina Brown got on it, it sort of like started going downhill in the late '90s, and after that with Remnick, I don't know. But the long form journalism is the only good thing about the New Yorker, and the poems sucked. I mean, the poetry editor at the New Yorker was just real garbage. Just pick the dumbest shit. Anyway, that's for another conversation. Because there aren't any good magazines anymore, any mainstream literary magazines, because the New Yorker, that's what it used to be. It used to be a mainstream literary magazine, cheerfully, healthfully middlebrow. And now, what the fuck is it? I don't know. And is there any other magazine that's publishing short stories or poetry?
You have the Paris Review, but I mean that just feels
Yeah, but without George Plimpton, it's Paris Review is nothing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And didn't the New Yorker publish multiple stories? Now you get one, and it's usually by a well-known or well-established author anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you used to get like 3 or 4.
And you could be like a newbie. You didn't have to have much of a backlog for them to say, yeah, we'll take a risk on this. Now it's like, no, you got to be. It's like, oh, Salman Rushdie, you got a short story, yeah, we'll publish it. That's the kind of regurgitation you're going to get.
Yeah, but also the other thing was that the New Yorker stories were of a type. A Perfect Day for Banana Fish was like the archetypal New Yorker story. It was sort of like quotidian and trivial, and then there was like a punch at the end that was sort of like an epiphany moment, right? And that was the prototypical Perfect Day for Banana Fish, the J.D. Salinger story. That was like the prototypical New Yorker story. And in point of fact, that I do believe is the first story that Salinger published with the New Yorker, if memory serves. Do you recall offhand?
If it's not the first, it's one of the first, and it's certainly the one I most associate with.
Yeah.
The other one I always associate as the typical New Yorker story to me, it's a similar tone, probably because he's influenced by Salinger, is John Cheever's The Swimmer. I don't know if you ever read The Swimmer.
Yeah. No, I saw the movie.
Much the same kind of idea.
I saw the movie with Burt Lancaster. That was a good movie.
Yeah. The movie is a pretty decent adaptation of the short story.
Yeah, but it's a Cheever. I never really got into it. He was sort of like John Updike's big brother, right? And that kind of the same kind of quotidian kind of like domestic situation that's kind of boring, And I mean, I never really, I'm a plot guy. I like shit with plots. I'm not that into like static stories like that, but. No, surprising that I'm the tone guy. I like the mood and the atmosphere and the language. So yeah. I'm like, I can appreciate it. Okay, I can listen to it, read it rather, and say, oh, that's a beautiful passage and very evocative and all the rest of it. But it doesn't really get me going. I want to find out what happens next. And I think that one of the failures of modern literature is that it has abandoned plot. They just don't give a shit about plot. And for me, plot is everything because it's a story. Ultimately, we are telling stories. And the whole notion of telling stories is you're sitting around a campfire. You're a Neanderthal. You're a caveman, whatever the hell. You're sitting around a campfire. You were lucky enough to slaughter the antelope. And so you're sitting around and some guy starts telling a story about people and things that they do. And the things that they do are illuminating or revealing. Ultimately, it's plot, because what you do, that's plot, right? All that other stuff, how well it's written, the language, all the rest of it, sure, it adds to the artistry, but my thinking has always been plot. Plot first and everything else second. But you think that I'm a heretic. You think that I'm like a Neanderthal for saying something like that.
Slight. You may have some slight ridges on your eyebrows from my perspective on that, but I think we had that conversation before. But I'll tell you what plot is interesting to me. What stories we tell. Can I tell you that the Joanne Reed story she's telling about?
Oh, that's a horrible segue. That's a horrible segue.
Well, horrible. It's either a horrible segue or I tell you how much of a Neanderthal you are. You want to pick?
Or how much of a Neanderthal Joy Ann Reed is. I mean, Jesus Christ, that woman is just, double digits when she manages to rise above the single digits. I mean, how on earth could anybody believe that the Russians hacked her 5 years ago, or whatever the fuck? Oh man, it's so fucking
but
funny.
How specifically subtle too? It's like the Russians gather together. It says, how are we going to ruin America today? It's like, well, I got an idea. You see this minor commentator who's just happens to be on liberal talk shows. I don't even know her name. It doesn't matter. Well, we'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to bring her down. How are we going to do that? Well, I'll tell you. We're not going to embarrass her right away. She would see that coming a mile away. I'm going to go back in time. And I'm going to write some homophobic articles. And just when the time is right, I'll expose her as being secretly backward reactionary thinking, and the Russians say, "Brilliant,
Yeah,
brilliant.
I mean,
Let's do that."
it's just, and the weird part, this whole story of Joyanne Reed is weirdly Stalinesque, because it's like she wrote shit that back in the day was approved, but the political circumstances changed and now it's not approved, and so she's desperately trying to come up with any lie, however absurd it may be, in order to justify the fact that she had written this shit way back when. It's goddamn funny, goddamn Stalinesque. I mean, the left keeps moving the fucking line. They keep moving the fucking line of acceptable behavior, and soon, nothing said today will be acceptable tomorrow, and everybody's going to be fucked in the left. It's just really goddamn funny,
And they have, and I may be fucking up my Latin. They have no concept of ex post hoc.
Oh,
the
yeah.
idea that you can't be held liable for breaking the rule before the rule was written.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
no idea of the concept. Yeah. Oh, didn't you hear that they tore down another monument? It was the guy, I forget his name, the guy who wrote "Oh Susanna." "Oh Susanna, don't you cry for me."
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. I don't know who the hell he was, okay? Some trivial, I mean, not trivial, I don't mean any disrespect to the man. Dead man, obviously. But he had some statue somewhere. He's a minor poet, songwriter, who, whatever you want to call him. And they tore down his statue. I think that's just fucking mean, I mean, he probably had like the one statue, right? And now, because "Oh Susanna," I suppose now is like a racist song, because it's like, in favor of the Confederacy or whatever. I don't think the lyrics say, "Oh, let's lynch some niggers today." I think it's just like perfectly quotidian.
Well, that's that's the lost stanza that you never seem to hear these days.
Oh, let's lynch some niggers.
Conrad Twitty would always do that as it closes out.
So let's go down to the hoedown, lynch us some niggers and then drink some moonshine. That's the missing stanza. Oh, okay, now I get it.
We are going to get into so much trouble because of you.
Oh man, no, look, if you can't use language, the available language to say some things, especially things that are funny and or vulgar, because a lot of times a well-placed vulgarity is exceedingly funny and at the same time exceedingly descriptive. If you can't say that, then you're cutting off big swaths of your ability to communicate with your fellow human beings, And the things that I was just saying, right, just before, of like lynching of African Americans, in very vulgar language, it's funny. And if a leftist can't laugh at that, well, of course they can't laugh at that because they take themselves so goddamn seriously. And here's the thing, they're all fucking blue stockings. That's the thing about the left. These guys. They are atheists, but they are no different from those Protestant blue stockings who used to police everybody's behavior back in the time of the Puritans. I mean, these people are the same people who burned witches at the stake in Salem. It's just goddamn.
They
funny.
Literally are the same people in most circumstances because it's the Yankees. It's the the New England, New York, Mid-Atlantic crowd that does this.
Yeah.
And yes, it's the same people. We're going to go really deep into it. The tendency of Puritan Protestantism and their approach to how you define society, the solas, through faith alone, through the Bible alone, through my own will alone, I can, define the kingdom of heaven, and I understand it free from any mediation. Right. You can easily see the mutation of that too. Oh, well, just secularism is perfectly fine, but we're still going to have some principles here. So it's, it's not a surprise to me that, the Puritanism still runs deep in left-wing thinking. But the other funny thing is, people are latching onto it who really don't have that genealogy, the various identity politics and what have you. But they're certainly finding it useful to use that, in part because I think, especially the thing with the statues, more than anything else. Well, partly I like statues, but most of them are, they're cheap things that are quickly put up. But the thing is, devoid of statues, devoid of physical manifestations of the past, it's easier to forget it.
Yeah.
It's easier to change it. It's easier to remember an alternative. And that's the ultimate goal we have here.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I was thinking of something the other day when I was a boy. I'm 50 now. When I was a boy, when I was like 6, 7 years old, and I heard the story of Columbus for the first time. Columbus was the hero. He was the hero, and he was a hero. He was very heroic, how he went out there, crossed the Atlantic, and everybody thought he was crazy and all the rest of it. And there's a story that he had said that was taught to me of how, he said, well, can you balance, I forget the story exactly, but it was basically, can you balance an egg on its end? And everybody tried around the table, and he just took the egg and dented it at the bottom and then balanced it perfectly. And he said, and everybody said, well, you can't do that. And we said, why not? That kind of like can-do spirit. Columbus, I was raised to view him as heroic. And now young people today, children today, are taught that he is evil. And there's something lost there, something of great value that is lost. Because I saw Columbus, as I was growing up, as a man who defied everybody's assumptions, presuppositions. He said that there's going to be land on the other side, that the earth is round. Now, do keep in mind, I was 7 years old, and I didn't know about how the Greeks had deduced that the earth was round and all kinds of other stuff, which I would learn much later. I mean, we're talking about a child here, right? In my childish imagination, Columbus was this heroic figure who ignored everybody else and challenged convention and the orthodoxy and sailed off and took great risks and finally landed in the Americas. Yay him. He was the hero of the story. And it was something to aspire to. But now the children view him as evil, and so they don't have that to aspire to anymore. I think it's sad.
Yeah, I may get on a rant here because this goes into a lot of things. But before I rant, I will say, this was not always the case. Like you said, you remember in your childhood. But I would also say, even in a bigger sense, the alternative name of the Americas was Columbia. Right. One of the earliest and the very first, official or unofficial American national anthem was "Hail Columbia," that named after him. And when he is very heroic, even if you realize that, hey, it's a business venture to fuck around and get away from the Portuguese control of the African path to the Indies. No, I'm going to go another way. Fuck them. No, that is something to be interested in. And the attitude that, look, he killed a bunch of people, as a result of his ventures. The thing that angers me most is because the people he is killing, and it reminds me of the people who think that the Lion King is a manifestation of how the jungle really is, where everybody gathers around and is happy that the new lion cub is born. No, these are the same tribes who are butchering each other for sport, who kill each other for hunting grounds, feeding grounds. The great, Sioux or the Lakota, as we always remember from, Western films or, things like Dances with Wolves. Like, oh, they fight for noble things. No, they don't. They killed the other tribes who, like cannibals. The Cheyenne, who introduced the horses to them. They paid back the Cheyenne for their courtesy by killing them all. I mean, these, let's not pretend otherwise.
Yeah, and they were cannibals. That's the thing. Look, I think this change of history of making everything that is non-European somehow better. We're seeing the catastrophic results. Did you hear about the thing about the Danish Minister of Immigration, the flack that she's getting?
Didn't she say she fucked up? Yeah. Somebody in Scandinavia said, "Oh, we fucked up on immigration." It's like, and to me, that always seems like the kid who says after like he has all the crayon all over the walls of your house says, "I think I made a mistake."
No. This is the Danish Minister of Immigration, and she's like, the immigrants, the Afghans and the Eritreans and Somalians and all the rest of it, they're lazy, they're violent, they're rapists. It's a horrible situation, right? Because all of our crime stats
and some I assume are good people.
Yeah. And the thing is, see, everybody called her evil, and that let me get the article because it's so goddamn funny because this poor woman, she is telling the truth. She is saying things that are factually accurate. And because of this, because she is saying things that are factually accurate, everybody hates her. Yeah, here, I got the article here. It's on Zero Hedge. And you guys listening, you should check out Zero Hedge because it's got all kinds of fun shit going on. Her name's Inger Storsberg, and she looks typically Danish. And she said, the country's immigration minister said a, quote, significant group of refugees, quote, cheats, lies, and abuses our trust to soak the Danish government for additional benefits. And, she published this in a Danish tabloid. And, In fact, two-thirds, she says that we also see young people under the age of 18 who cheat their way into getting better treatment and more benefits, she stated, stressing that an unaccompanied minor costs over 500,000 kroner, approximately $80,000, per year for the state. Quote, she says, in fact, two-thirds of those whom we later age tested proved to be older than they originally stated. Okay, so two-thirds of the people who are underage turn out to be lying, okay? And lying and fulfilling what she's saying. She's saying that they lie and cheat to get and abuse the Danish government's trust to get more benefits, right? And she is being victimized. People saying that it is the Danish immigration minister who, quote, cheats and abuses the Danish people's trust. You are a sad example of Denmark's idea and understanding of integration, one person wrote, while another stated that Stoltenberg's rhetoric criminalizes people who, quote, happen to come from another country and are on the run, end quote. I mean, she is telling the truth, and they hate her for it. Oh, God. The Europeans are all fucking nuts.
Now, to me, the interesting thing to test there, because I could see it going either way, is to the degree, what is the degree to which that's the chattering class's opinion of her versus the actual full Danish population. Now, the thing, because that's my test that I still haven't figured out with Scandinavia, is there's certainly a big swath of people who believe that kind of shit. Mm-hmm. That, Denmark is defined by the ability to incorporate people who are not Danish, essentially is their line. But, that can't, I have a strong feeling a lot of Danes are probably sitting quietly saying, I don't agree with any of this, but I'm too cowardly to do anything about
well, that's the thing.
Or I can't.
Yeah. The Swedes have this saying that there's they call it the corridor, I believe, the corridor of acceptable opinion. And anything deviating from that corridor, they don't dare verbalize because they will be socially ostracized. And one of those things is the whole immigration thing. And so they have to tiptoe around that issue, even though they all pretty much agree that it's a fucking disaster, but they can't because it's outside of that corridor. I do believe it's called a corridor. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I think that, well, look, we've talked about this before. I think that, Europe is fucked and there's nothing to be done about it. I think that demographically it's over for them and they should just, just sit back and watch their continent be overrun by a bunch of savages who hate them, and so that's that. But going back to Joanne Reed, oh man, she was lying her ass off, and her tech expert, wasn't he like some bullshit artist or something like that?
Anybody who's going to make a case that she wants to make is by definition a bullshit artist.
Okay. No, go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Oh, yeah. So I was going to say, the other thing about this, which people aren't really addressing in this situation that I can see, I'm sure people are talking about it that I'm just not seeing, is the degree to which, in the Black community, let's be very honest, there's a lot of conservative elements on this question. By that, I mean, there is not an acceptability as one would have hoped in the great Rainbow Push Coalition Society to have acceptance of homosexuality and whatnot. Joanne is probably manifesting something that she probably really does believe, and something that a lot of people like her probably believe.
Yeah, because the vast majority of African Americans, at least in the United States, are very anti-gay. They don't like transsexuals. They don't like homosexuals. But they have to be in the same political camp. The whole Rainbow Coalition. Yeah. You see Chance the Rapper backed off the whole I support Kanye shit? You hear about that?
I did not see that he backed off. What did he say?
He long, mealy-mouthed apology, and he's my brother. I mean, he got caught between a rock and a hard place. He should have just kept his fucking mouth shut from the get-go, right? But he wanted to suck up to Kanye, and he pissed off all the liberals. So he's trying to, split the difference. He's trying to stay friendly with both because he says, I support my brother, Kanye. I'm assuming that Kanye West plays a pivotal role in his career. And on the other hand, he's like, trying to back off what he said, which is basically that, the blacks don't have to vote exclusively for the Democratic Party. It's not, he says, what was it? The Democrats don't own black. No, he didn't say that. That would have been way too insidious.
No, he basically said that blacks shouldn't be expected to be Democrats. He did it with a small d, so I would have doubled down and say there should be no democracy, period. Fuck you all.
Yeah, but no, he got caught in between a rock and a hard place. And Kanye, just keeps on sailing on. God, Kanye is fucking nuts. I mean, I think that guy is really off his rocker. And yet at the same time, seeing this and seeing where it's going to end, I'm just like, Jesus. Oh, and talking about drama, what do you think of the whole JF Andy split?
Well, as you know, I have like a 1 foot in, 1 foot out situation where, by our conversations, I see and observe it. I see it on Twitter, but I try to be removed from it, largely because I just don't have the stomach for it. I think, we had talked about how there certainly feels like an Ouroboros situation going on with our side, but it's not in some dramatic fight over ideological differences. It's, who's going to be the stupider person quicker, and how can we chew on them as they're, self-immolating. It's a mess.
Well, I know all these guys, right? I know Andy. I've spoken with him just a few times. JF, I know a lot better. I know Tonka pretty well, and I've been on Ralph Retort's stream a few times. So I sort of like know all these participants, and of course, Failure hates you. He's a great guy. I think that they're all wonderful people. Now, between JF and Andy, I think that they were both fucking prima donna junior high school girls. They had a good thing going. They were making good money. Okay. You have a problem with your partner, you shut the fuck up about it, at least in public. If you have a problem with your partner, you go up to him privately and you say, look, I don't like this, this, and that. And you try to iron it out. That's what partners do. You don't fucking iron out your differences on air, okay?
Yeah.
No, you just don't fucking do that. It's stupid. It's incredibly stupid. And I think that both of them fucked up. I mean, come on, you've been involved in a lot of different businesses, right? You've either observed those businesses or been a participant in those businesses. Now, you know for a fact that it's impossible for two partners to get along in everything. There's always going to be some point of contention, right? How do you handle it? I mean, you tell me. I'm asking you.
Well, no, you pointed it correctly. It's something that you deal with privately, but publicly, there's always a unified front, and I'll tell you why. Because the image of going against your partners, or being the hero and saying like, oh, my partner here is kind of a son of a bitch, but I'll be the one who takes care of you. That undermines your business relationship in a very strong way, not just the relationship between you and your partners, but also your clients. Your clients know that there's discord. They'll use it against you for their advantage, what have you. Right. And so I'm on the same front as you on this. And I think you brought up a good point. I also don't hold any animosity to any of these guys. I actually like listening to all of them speak. So that's why it's frustrating to see everybody kind of pissed off at each other all the time.
Yeah. Look, insofar as any kind of like a business, if you got a partner and you start displaying out in public that you have disagreements with your partner, your clients will get nervous about giving you their business. And your competitors will start licking their chops, figuring they can take some of your business. It can only hurt you. So you never, ever, ever argue with your partner, ever. And okay, in this situation, what is it that they're selling? They're selling entertainment. And so actually, it in a weird way, it could be beneficial if you do see some kind of friction between them, because it makes the show more interesting. Like, for instance, Siskel and Ebert from your neck of the woods, Chicago. Those two guys, those two film critics, they kind of didn't like each other. And at the end, there was a grudging respect. But at the beginning, they just didn't like each other. They didn't cotton to one another. They had different opinions. And it was precisely that difference of opinion and that fact that they slightly did not like one another that led to interesting shows. And they were both smart enough to realize that that slight animosity towards one another helped the show, helped their business. And so precisely because of that animosity, they stuck with it. Okay, now that's a smart move. And my thinking is that JF and Andy should have gone along those lines of like, being pissed off at one another, but using it to the advantage of the show. One being more political, more intellectual, the other wanting to have a good time and more fights and drama and that kind of thing. That kind of tension in the show would have made an interesting dynamic. But falling prey to that, because Siskel and Ebert, as much as they disliked one another, as much as they sometimes really went at each other over a particular picture that they disagreed over, they never allowed that to break their business. I mean, It continued until Gene Siskel passed away from his brain tumor. And even when he was dying and in the hospital, he was doing his show over the phone. I mean, that's how much they cared about their business, about the Siskel and Ebert show. So I think that that these two guys, Andy and JF, they were just so immature. They were just so fucking prima donna. They allowed bullshit to overwhelm what was a good thing, man. They had a good thing going, and they fucked it up. I don't know.
Let me ask the normie question here, because I still don't get it. Probably because I'm a little bit removed. What was it about?
I'm sorry, you dropped there.
Yeah, their beef. What was the big thing that was bothering them?
He said, she said, yeah, you said this in some streaming. Fucking little faggots. A couple of bitches. Both of them. And I respect both of them. But they acted like a pair of bitches, like a pair of junior high school girls in the fucking girls' bathroom arguing about, bullshit. I mean, I don't know what the fuck. It was this penny ante shit. Nothing really substantial. Okay? And everybody's playing it that Andy lost because he's lost a lot of subscribers, which makes sense if you think about it. And Andy himself pointed out that when Andy and JF broke up, JF left the show because it's Andy's show. And so all those people who had subscribed to Andy's channel, because they were following JF, they unsubscribed and then resubscribed to JF's channel where he's going to be doing his streams, right? So it made sense that Andy would lose subscribers and JF would gain. JF subscribers, for people who don't know, is something like 38,000, 40,000, something like that. Less than 40,000, I do believe, at this time. And Andy's channel is something like 215, 220,000 subscribers. Andy lost, I don't know, a couple of thousand subscribers. He said on some stream right after he canned JF, because ultimately he fired JF. JF was an employee. And I think that he said right after that in some stream on the Ralph Retort, I think, or Tonka or whoever's, he said that he was prepared to lose 10,000 subs. He figured that was going to be the hit that he was going to take. It wasn't that high. The thing is, though, Andy's got a lot of dead subs. I mean, I think of his active subscriber base, of his 200 and, I think it's 18, something like that. I would guess that maybe 100,000 are sort of like dead, and his real subscriber base is actually care is like 120,000, something like that. So he lost maybe 3%. I don't think it's a big deal in the overall scheme of things. And if they both continue, I think that in a year's time, nobody's going to even remember this. But it's a pity.
Well, if it's as petty as I think it is, a part of me feels like the solution should have just been they privately got into a ring. They hit each other a little bit. One guy gets a bloody nose and it's done.
Yeah.
That's how it should have resolved.
Yeah.
Instead of this. So, but now I can tell you, maybe you and I, in our scheming ways, can think of 5 years from now, a la Frank Sinatra, bringing back Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. We can get these guys to shake hands, make amends.
No, JF has sort of gone out of his way to burn bridges, huh? I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, like I said, I don't know the whole story. I kind of keep a little bit removed from it. I didn't know it was getting that bad.
No. Well, what happened was that in the stream immediately after the breakup, JF went on his own stream and sort of said a lot of nasty shit about Andy, which I thought was uncalled for, and he kept bringing up this whole I'm more intellectual than thou kind of thing. Now, look, I'm a huge fan of Andy's. I think that Andy he's not book smart. He's not at all. I'd be surprised if he's read more than a dozen books in his entire life. Okay, but he's a sharp customer. He's a sharp and shrewd businessman, and so I think that he's going to do fine. I think that he'll, in a year's time. He lives for this shit. He's been at YouTube for a decade now, so. He has more experience. He knows the ups and downs of the business. I think he's gonna do fine. I'm not so confident so far as JF is concerned, because I think in the short term, yeah, sure, JF seems like he's doing good. He already did a show with a co-host. He's going to be doing more shows with more guest co-hosts, sort of like to see which one would fit because he wants to have a co-host. I'm sure Andy's going to do something similar, but I actually think that Andy is going to do long term. Andy's going to do better. That's. I mean, if I had to bet on futures, because I think basically because Andy has more experience in the business. He has more experience and he knows that there's ups and downs. He's not going to be thrown by a bad patch. He's going to realize that it's a long game. And he knows that. So I wish them both the best. Nothing but the best. I think that they were just so fucking stupid because they had a sweet gig going, man. Oh, man. I just...
Well, remember not too long ago when I told you for for a variety of reasons I thought this was going to be a short-lived thing. The general Internet Bloodsports.
Yeah,
I actually I'll
Huh?
I'll say this: I didn't expect it would end because of this reason. So I was wrong.
It's not.
But I was right that it was short-lived.
No, I disagree. It's got to be around a lot longer. This kind of like internal battling and fighting and shit like that. This is going to continue because it's fun. This drama shit of these participants. People you love or you hate or you love to hate. It's going to continue. Like for instance, like Baked Alaska, right? Baked Alaska came out as a big old, Christian conservative. He found Jesus. Praise the Lord. He found Jesus. He found Jesus, and now he's, saying the Lord's Prayer and doing the Lord's work. And even though he's called Baked Alaska, which basically implies that he's a guy from Alaska who smokes a lot of weed, but now apparently he's, found Jesus, praise the Lord, and he's going to, follow that path. And it's just like more absurd as it goes,
Well, like I said, I thought the Baked Alaska comes from, he named himself after a dessert that was inflamed, but you know what, if the guy really does believe in Jesus and that means something to him, from my perspective, all power to him. Enjoy it. I think he's out. I think he's out of the game though, as far as being a mover and shaker in right-wing political dialogue. Though.
Yeah, I agree. Now, here's something interesting. What do you think of the whole business situation? Because this whole model of the Internet Bloodsports is based on the super chat dollars, right? Because all of these Internet Bloodsports, they get demonetized. They don't get any ad revenue. I mean, Google basically looks at them as the ugly adopted child, right? They want nothing to do with it. So these channels get the money from the super chats. My thinking has always been that there's a hardcore of people who are putting up super chat money, and eventually their wallets are going to run dry, and that's the end of the Internet Bloodsports. That's my thinking at this point.
Yeah, and that was what I laid out to you a few months ago. I think that's the case. So what's the tendency you have to do to overcome that? Well, if there is a limit to the wallet share that you're going to get, you have to cycle in new people. And how do you cycle in new people? Either with new hosts, new lines of attack. It becomes a booking business. And, to the extent to which they're successful at that and they bring in viewers, that's good. But the thing is, you have to make sure you convert transient subscribers to long-term subscribers. And that's going to be a tough, conversion thing. And yeah, you can model this stuff. Actually, that's partly what we do in business forecasting. I just think it's kind of tough because I think you and I have talked about this, is that the reality, even though, people like to say, oh, I've got X millions of views or X subs or this many subs. It's, the number of the audience isn't just adding those subs together. It's repeat people. I think the core audience is somewhere around, I'd say, rough estimate, 300,000, 400,000 at the high end. Mm-hmm. So, your and the ability of people to continuously drop in the super chat bills, you probably have some people who've got a lot of cash on hand. They can burn it. Others, may have some good times, some bad times. So, that to me seems like a hard market to say it's going to keep on, giving the cash consistently. That's just my view.
Yeah, I think that it's going to just run dry. It just seems inevitable to me that this thing of raking in, a few $100s every day, it's going to run dry. I don't know. I wish them the best, but I'm really curious as to how this is going to go. Because on the one hand, you're right. It does become a booking business. And the problem is that a lot of people do not want to be booked on these shows, like the left. All of the left, nobody on the left wants to be booked on a Internet Bloodsport. They're all afraid that they're going to get torn to pieces. Tonka Saw, who's I think actually the smartest commentator of the whole milieu, even though he's almost at the center of it, he's smart enough to be able to distance himself and look at it. He said something to me really once really smart. He said, "Look, ultimately in Internet Bloodsports, people are realizing that the guy who's right is going to win, and the guy who's wrong, he's going to wind up screaming and looking like a fool. And so the people who are willing to go on, they know that they're going to win. Okay, and it's the guys who know that they're going to lose that are realizing, no, I'm not going there, because it's not only that I'm going to lose, I'm going to look stupid because I'm going to wind up screaming. And that is really interesting, because you need to find guests who are blind to what will happen, or they have to be so convinced of their position that they don't realize what they're walking into. But the left, the lefties in general, the big names on the left in the YouTube community, they know that they're in the wrong. They might not admit it, but the very fact that they're not willing to go into Internet Bloodsports sort of like proves the fact that they realize that they're wrong. You see what I'm saying?
I do, and this is tangent, but it's kind of related to the discussion. Where the hell does Lacey, the whole Lacey Green taking the red pill conversion situation stand? And I don't mean just from her stand, or I mean
you're
just
talking about the
general.
way that's ancient history, man. That's like Paleolithic shit. No, who gives a
Well,
shit?
the reason I'm saying is because if you're talking about left-wing YouTube, right? There's a couple of things that could be going on there. One, they just become recalcitrant and know that they're a dying breed, and so they stay in their own little circle. Or two, they become flirtatious with this kind of crowd, and I just don't know where they are at this point. I'm kind of shocked that we would even say there's a left-wing YouTube. I mean, I know that probably exists, but it certainly isn't making big splashes in the way I'm thinking of.
Did you see that Dr. Lehman video about the resurgent left-wing YouTubers?
I did not.
Oh, well, okay. Pity. I should have sent it to you before we sat down for this. Well, Lehman's thesis is basically that the left-wing YouTubers are making a strong comeback, and he's basically he gives like a brief history of what has led us to this position. He goes back to even before Gamergate. He goes with the atheist community and fighting about the Christians and how the atheists won, and that morphed into the Gamergate situation, and then kicking feminists and left wingers as being poopy heads and stuff like that, and finally Skeptic TM, and finally now Internet Bloodsports, and the resurgent left. And he talks about ContraPoints. He talks about that fellow Three Arrows. Talks about a bunch of YouTubers who are on the left and who are rising. I mean, the Three Arrows guy, he's a hardcore leftist, and he's like rising fairly quickly. And Lehman is basically saying that it could be that the left starts to win at YouTube, it's an interesting thesis that I don't agree with, because I don't think that he quite understands why the right is so big on YouTube. He doesn't quite seem to understand that the right doesn't have any other media outlet. And so there are a lot of people who are on the right who wind up going onto YouTube because there's no place else for them to go and express their opinion. Whereas for people who are left-wing, there are lots of places where they can go and express their opinion and get applause for it. And so they don't have that no place else to go mentality that a lot of right-wing YouTubers have, right? But Lehman's thesis is really interesting. He's talking about how it's gotten boring, the whole, kick the SJWs and kick the feminists. There are so many feminist fail compilations that it's just not funny anymore. It's just over. That whole movement is over. And he's trying to figure out what's going to be the next thing. That's ultimately what Lehman is interested in. He wants to know what's going to be the next thing. And Internet Bloodsports seems to be the transitionary thing. But I don't know if it's a transitionary thing or it's going to be like a real thing, permanent. You think it's transitionary?
Yeah, so I think just based on your summary, here's how I think Lehman has a point. And it relates to what we've discussed earlier about when you're, with your partner, you don't fuck with your partner on air, you have a unified front. And when you do fuck with them in a public way, people take advantage of that. I think the degree to which the left is going to seem like they're going to win on YouTube is potentially predicated on the fact that when you look at what our side is doing, and again, this is the degree to which this is important to you to see the right wing as a cohesive whole winning. If we get the impression that our side is all about Internet Bloodsports and literally fucking with ourselves, because it seems like those are the audience that goes on and gets into these fights right now, then it does seem like, oh, look, they're just eating themselves. They're punching themselves in the face. We, the outsider, the insurgent, it's always easier for the insurgent to find some sort of victory against such a situation. So that could very well be how it looks like to the average person. Like, hey, there's, these left-wing guys are, have very confident about their opinions, don't really have their own side shitting on them every 5 seconds. They're going to look like they can win. To the degree to which this stuff's important to you, keep that in mind.
Well, you could be right. My objection to a lot of right-wing people in the YouTube community is that they're not in favor of something. It's easy to pin them down on what they're against, but they are not advocating something that everybody can get behind. And I think that that's been a key mistake. What do you think of this whole May 6th meetup that's going to happen with a whole bunch of big names like Molyneux and Lauren Southern and Brittany Pettibone and Tommy Robinson and Milo Yiannopoulos, Sargon of Akkad? They're all going to be there. They did this poster with duct tape over their mouths. It's all in support of Dankula. What do you think of that whole show?
I got to tell you, from this, just from reading the list of attendees, I'm not sure what's going to be the case. Largely because I don't see people with a shared vision of much of anything other than generally like, hey, free speech is good. And, that, in and of itself is certainly, something interesting to me, but I don't think that's a sufficient category enough to actually change anything. If we're going to find out like that, hey, look, to what we've discussed before, look, England is an evil country right now, and the fact that people are sleepwalking through it is a disaster. Something's got to change. That would be a goal I'd be very interested in seeing. I don't think it's going to be that. I think it's going to say, hey, we should be allowed to speak, and the rest of England will do what England typically does and say, well, that may be good, but we should all just get along. I have a feeling that's how it's going to end. I mean, power to them. I hope they succeed. I'm not thinking or hoping for much.
Yeah. A lot of people are saying how cringy it was, the ad thing. Personally, I looked at it as whoever designed the ad was very consciously trying to make it into a mainstream thing, consciously trying to reach out to the mainstream. Because the way it was lit, it was black and white pictures of each of the participants with duct tape over their mouths. And, the vibe seemed like we're trying to break through. We're trying to make a movement that goes mainstream. And we want this march to be mainstream.
It seemed almost too professionally done. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Those posters and pictures. It's like, what did like UNICEF come up with this campaign at it? Because it has that kind of glossy quality to it. And I get why you may want that, but I think from our crowd, I think the idea of like like a roughed up pamphlet on the schoolyard saying like resist this, that, or the other in the sort of right-wing language would be more compelling. The idea that this is an insurgency, and if it's so mainstream acceptable, how much of an insurgency is it really going to go? I don't know.
I don't know either. What I do know is that everybody's consciously calling them alt-light, that this is the whole alt-light crowd. I've been following Godwinson. You ever heard of this guy? He's a Brit.
Only through you.
Yeah. Well, Godwinson is a Brit who does like videos that are pretty thoughtful. He's got that, crisp, nice British accent, like educated, kind of like upscale accent, and a real one, not like LARPers that we've mentioned in the past. Anyway, this guy, Godwinson, he does really great videos. On Twitter, he's kind of like a dickhead, realistically, he's kind of like an asshole. But he is very negative on the whole Dankula thing, at least on Twitter. And word around the campfire is that his thinking is something that I hadn't really anticipated, but I got to thinking about it, and he's probably right. He thinks that this is the Dankula who raised £100,000 for a appeal to a sentence. He thinks that this is a big old money grab, and that for all the bullshit that it's going to be ultra transparent and so forth and so on, that this £100,000 that they raised in a single day, which is remarkable if you think about it. He's of the opinion that it's just going to wind up, basically to support Dankula and his compadres in the liberalistism movement. And I'm not quite sure that Godwinson is wrong, because look, let's look at Dankula really cold-bloodedly. The guy's, what, 30 years old. He's got no marketable skill except shitposter. I don't think a CV that says shitposter at the top is, not a lot of companies are looking for such an individual with that particular skill set, if you will, right? So, he's got to make hay while the sun's out. And this is his big moment in the sun. And he's got to figure out how to, move forward and continue some sort of career. And so I don't know if I don't think that it's going to be so nakedly as to grab some of this cash, but certainly use this movement to create some sort of job for himself insofar as politics somehow. Yeah, I could certainly see that because a lot of these guys, they don't have anything else going for them in their lives. And so do you think that the liberalists will wind up being some sort of like a political machine to create employment for its participants?
Yeah, I certainly believe that, and certainly in some cases, I don't think that's fair to Lauren Southern or Stefan Molyneux for whatever you want to say about their political opinions. I don't think they really belong in that crowd per se. I mean, yeah, you could find examples where it seems to fit. I think that's more of a Sargon and potentially a Dankula situation, and to a certain extent, yes. It ultimately may simply become a jobs program because if you think about the likelihood of the alternative, Sargon is not going to be an MP. There is no way he can be that compelling enough to gain enough votes. There's no way he's going to make it past, for past the post system situation that England has in its elections. So what is left? Well, they're going to be presence. In a public setting and online, there is going to be shit talking to a certain extent, and there's going to be passing of the hat. So yeah, whether or not that's their intention, I mean, it may be the end result of just the situation that they're in. So if you want to subsidize Sargon, go right ahead. Just realize that's exactly what you're doing. And I don't even, I'm not even going to judge you for that. I just, I would simply suggest that, hey, if you think this is going to be a grand political change, I don't think the situation is really going to cause that. And I think England is really fucked up to the point where something even sterner needs to happen.
Yeah. Because we talked about it the other day. I forget if it was the last podcast or the one that's going to appear after this one, but it doesn't matter. The point is, England is looking to look like a police state. Oh, and that poor child died. What's his name? Alfie Evans, was it?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, just a tragedy. I mean, it's always a tragedy when a child dies. Every single time, and I can't imagine what the parents are feeling, and I hope never to experience such a thing because there's nothing worse for an individual than to watch as one's child dies before their eyes. There's nothing that comes close. But yeah, all the things that are happening in England, it's just looking like like the country is a complete mess. And I just wanted to end this conversation as we're pivoting away. Trump is going to be visiting England, and Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, said that the people of England will exercise their right to free speech and tell Trump what they really think. Now, let me ask you, did you find that the most ironic comment ever?
Well, you see, I understand the language that Sadiq Khan uses. You have to translate it. When he says England will exercise free speech, what he really says is he's going to throw acid into Trump's face.
Oh, that's free speech in England. Yeah. Or I thought it was a knife attack. Yeah, acid in the face.
Well, he's got that lovely anti-knife campaign. It's like, give up the knife. It's like, I used to be angry and into knives. Now I'm into, pottery or something. I'm like, what the dear God, this is how it is. And remember the ultimate joke, the meme we had a few years ago about England and any kind of country that, really has a big thing against weapons is like, they will soon demand you need a butter knife license. Well, surprise.
Yeah. Oh my God! Yeah, it's shocking. They're not letting 16-year-olds buy kitchenware. What the fuck? It's absurd. They are carding you when you go and buy a set of steak knives. I think it's insane. I think that they really have lost their minds.
Well, I'll ask the blunt question. I feel like we're going to be picking on England for a while, but it's big enough to be serious. I ask anybody who's listening who may be in England or the UK, why do you live there?
Yeah. I mean, I was living there, and at the end there was no upside for it. To me, there was just no upside. Very expensive city. London is very expensive. It's architecturally beautiful, sure, but you're not. Everything is so expensive that it just feels. Getting lunch is £20 in just a halfway decent restaurant that's not McDonald's, right? Any kind of theater or whatever, you're talking north of £200. £200 is what, like $300 practically, $280.
Something like that, yeah.
It's so expensive. You don't feel that you're getting much out of it. People, the personal relationships in London are very income based. You basically make friends with people who are helping you make money. And if they're not helping you make money, you sort of like cut off those relationships, not because you're a money grubber, but because life in England in London at least, is so expensive that you need to hedge your time and just focus on the people who can get you the cash to survive in that godforsaken city. And the city is overrun by foreigners. You walk up and down Kensington, and it's full of hookah bars, Arabs, Muslim women dressed up in the whole, not just hijabs, but niqabs, are they called? The ones that are head to toe and you only see the eyes, like a little band for the eyes. Yeah, it's like that. It looks like Riyadh, frankly. Riyadh with London architecture. It's just kind of pathetic. They surrendered their own capital city. And I feel sorry for the Brits, but not that sorry. And now.
So what you're saying is they're exercising their free speech.
Yeah. But so yeah, I think that England is fucked, and there's nothing more to be said about that. So anyway, we've been going on for a while, so I think that we're going to call it a podcast. Anything else you wanted to touch on before we hang up?
No, I think that's a depressing but solid note to end on.
Yes.
England's exercising its free against Trump, and acid and knife attacks probably will go up a noticeable percentage when he comes and visits.
Yeah, basically. Oh, God. Oh, that's just pathetic. So anyway, this is Coach Red Pill signing off for Dr. Benway and myself, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for the time, everybody.